Now, turning to another story where, despite both Sudan and Egypt's rejections, the Nile Basin Cooperative Framework Agreement officially came into force this weekend, which creates an institutional body to promote and coordinate cooperation among basin states when it comes to matters of Nile governance. Now, that's quite a mouthful, so to talk about it more and unpack it for us, I'm joined by Mariam, an analyst with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. I'm curious to begin this Nile Basin Cooperative Framework Agreement. Exactly why didn't Sudan and Egypt want this to go through? What's their reasoning?
Good to be with you today, Nicole. I'll start by saying that the Nile Basin Cooperative Framework Agreement is a product of about a decade of negotiations among countries that share the Nile River, and it was an attempt to achieve a more equitable access to Nile resources. Population booms across these countries all over Africa are forcing them to rethink and reassess how they use the Nile and how their needs will change in the short and long term. We often forget that the Nile reaches more than just Egypt and goes as deep into the heart of Africa as Uganda. Up until recently, Egypt and Sudan have had a sort of monopoly on the Nile, but this is changing, of course. For Cairo and Khartoum, this agreement puts them on the back foot, and they are now having to negotiate for access to Nile resources. This has historically not been the case, and is the main reason behind Egypt and Sudan's objection to this agreement.
And so if both Egypt and Sudan object to this agreement, if they see it as non-binding, what can they do potentially to stop it or not agree to it?
This will remain the crux of the conversation here, Nicole, this question. What can Egypt and Sudan do to stop this? Realistically and practically, not very much, unfortunately for them. But what we are seeing is diplomatic pressure and engagement being applied. A prime example of this is the tussle between Egypt and Ethiopia at the UN Security Council just a few weeks ago, where they exchanged letters. Notably, a summit of Nile nations was due to take place later this week on the 17th in Uganda, but was postponed. Uganda's foreign ministry refused to give a reason for why this summit was postponed, but unconfirmed reports say that this rescheduling was due to a disagreement among nation states.
You mentioned that disagreement, so how could this even widen the tensions that we are seeing between these countries and specifically Ethiopia, like you just mentioned?
Absolutely. Ethiopia is a growing power, and we're seeing Ethiopian leadership begin to flex that power on the international stage. Addis Ababa is seeking to assert itself and pursue what it perceives to be in its national interest. The problem here lies in the fact that what's best for Ethiopia's national interest comes at a great cost to its neighboring countries. This delicate situation is poised for escalation, and it will be important to watch closely as these nation states navigate this tenuous issue.
And we'll certainly be keeping our eyes on that. Mariam, Wahba, I appreciate you giving us all of the latest insight when it comes to this kind of complex topic.
Thank you for having me.